The 1980s were full of some of the greatest heroes ever created that have stayed in pop culture. And one of the lesser known but more appreciated is Rainius Wilson, aka Clamp Champ. And if you're new to this channel or you've been living under Iraq for the last few years, obviously Clamp Champ is a Masters of the Universe character, or we wouldn't be doing it in this series, would we? And he was introduced late in the Masters of the Universe line, which is why, as cool and amazing as he is, and a breakthrough hero, he isn't as well known, because the line was kind of on decline by the time he came out. Now, let's get one thing out of the way. He is not the token black character of Masters of the Universe. Yes, he's black. And there are other black characters. The idea that there's supposed to be like a racial harmony, like you have to have characters of every race, to me, characters about who they are, not their skin color. It's awesome to have variety, and I do think everyone should be invited to the party, and everyone should get to participate, no matter what your religion, race, species, planet of origin, whatever. But yeah, people point out way too much the idea that Clamp Champ is the only black character, because there's a lot. Well, okay, maybe there weren't as many in 1987 when he was introduced, but it wasn't exactly unheard of. And granted, Sunman probably has a lot to pay homage to for Clamp Champ, and now they're together in Origins, but that's not the point. We're going to talk about him not based on the color of his skin, because this is a black character. See, he's black, he's like cold jet black, he's also a monster and an alien. This is a Masters of the Universe character. His name is Clamp Champ, and he is awesome. So with that out of the way, let's just talk about him as a character, please, and all of the things that make him part of the Masters of the Universe world, even though for most people who got into the brand in the earlier half, he's a little unknown. But if you were there for the later half, he was one of your favorites, and that's one of the big reasons that he remains a fan favorite to this day, showing up in fan art, customs, all sorts of ways. Because, well, the good guys didn't have too many tech guys. I mean, Man-at-Arms, obviously, and we're going to talk about Clamp Champ coming in to sort of take over that role. But he also represented a human sort of soldier, and there weren't that many that we got. A lot of aliens, a lot of monsters, a lot of ninjas and ghosts. In fact, Clamp Champ came along because they needed a figure who could be a head only. In other words, very minimal parts. It was the same wave as Scareglow and Ninjor, King Randor, the mini-comic The Search for Keldor shipped with a lot of these characters. This wave was done to get more characters to the market quickly, and all of the characters that shipped in this wave had very few new parts, pretty much a head only. King Randor used Jitsu's armor, Scareglow was just a head with a soft goods cape, and Clamp Champ was a head and a giant clamp accessory, and that was it. Relatively, that was very inexpensive. Now, you may notice that his armor looks familiar. Yep, Clamp Champ is basically just Fisto without the fist and with a new head. It's one of those things where once you see it, you can't unsee it, but a lot of people never noticed it. There's obviously some repaints in the Masters of the Universe line that are not just obvious, but are meant to be called out as repaints. We're supposed to see Faker as a He-Man repaint. The whole Merman Stinkor thing isn't as noticeable until you take off Stinkor's armor, which is also Mechanex's armor, and you realize that they're also the same figure with just different armor. So while this has heritage of going back to the very beginnings of the line, the middle part got a lot of tooling. And by the time Clamp Champ came along, well, it was a rush to market to get new figures out there in '86, so he got a new head only. Now, his origin and his story was greatly expanded on in classics, especially because we wanted to show that he was of the generation of Adam and Teela. He grew up with them. He gets name-dropped in one of the mini-comics in a flashback when we see everyone as children. So there's Rainius there, and that's what their teacher Songster is teaching them history, and that's what he calls him. And a lot of people are like, oh, Rainius, that must be Clamp Champ, because the figure hadn't come out yet. So he would grow up in the royal court and would become King Randor's bodyguard. So that was his role in the original mini-comics, and that's why we wanted him to sort of grow up in the court with Teela and Adam. In the final episode of 2000X, only told as the captured mini-comic that came with the DVDs, it's shown that Man-at-Arms was going to revert to his Snake Man persona permanently. This was from a marketing toy perspective to get vehicles out there for the Snake Man. But because of this, well, it left a void in the Man-at-Arms position in Randor's court, and that was filled by Clampchamp, who went on from being his bodyguard to the new Man-at-Arms. And unfortunately, during the second Ultimate Battleground, had to face off against his friend and former mentor, and was responsible for ending Snake Man-at-Arms' terror. But there was a happy ending because he reverted back to his old self for just long enough to say goodbye. Alright, so back to Clampchamp, and especially Clampchamp in the Motu Classics line. So he was always supposed to be kind of a really easy figure to do, especially because we figured we'd just be reusing the the Fisto armor, just like in the vintage line. Now, Origins got around the giant accessory by putting him in the deluxe line, where they could also give him extra heads, which I'm always in favor of action figures getting extra heads. You get so much from a head. And other figures in this line, like Ram Man, while they were bigger, Clampchamp just got a bigger accessory. But the whole shared parts thing, much like done in Origins, in Classics, was there from the beginning from a tooling budget, as far as he was sort of slotted in as a low-cost figure. And again, that's because the idea was he was going to use just the basic human body. We already had the Fisto armor, and he just needed a clamp weapon. Well, the Horsemen, who always go above and beyond, had actually given Fisto original armor with a position for his giant 2000X sword to slide into his back. So suddenly now we realized, oh, shoot, we didn't have it in the budget to give Clampchamp armor, because we were assuming we were going to use Fisto's armor. But that's okay, because the line was actually doing so well that we were able to honestly just bump it up and give him dedicated armor. So it's close to Fisto's armor, but it's unique enough to say, I'm Clampchamp, not Fisto, ladies. So he could use He-Man's body and then just get armor and his accessory. And again, the Horsemen, amazing job. They gave him not only his accessory, but his 2000X clamp, and then because he had original armor, they could create a brand new back. So the vintage figure just had Fisto's plain back, so now that he had unique armor, the Horsemen created a brand new look for the back of his armor. They took a lot of influence from the 2000X Staction they did, since he never appeared in the show, but showed up in their non-articulated figure, hence Staction figure line from NECA. So that's where the second clamp comes from. That was part of that line. You can see it there in the middle. So that was his second accessory, since the plan was every figure should come with two accessories, so one could be removed for an eventual retail release, which never happened. His bio also very important because, as I mentioned, we name-dropped Ranius in the mini-comic before the figure came out, so people had already figured out that was his real name, and of course that was confirmed on the bio. Now, why give him a real name? Well, his mom obviously did not name him Clampchamp, just like Duncan is Man-at-Arms, and Adam is He-Man. So the real name Ranius, while introduced in the mini-comic, confirmed on the bio, was then used and name-dropped in the Revelation show, which I thought was really cool. I'm like, that's awesome. We came up with that for Classics, and now that he's going to be shown in the content for the very first time in Revelation, they called him Ranius. So that was awesome. Clampchamp, very popular still, and I think more so now that he's appeared in 2 more toy lines since '87 and had additional action figures, not to mention years of fan art, fan appreciation, showing up on Revelations, etc., etc. I mean, Clampchamp is badass. Not only, is he a fist-to-fist hand fighter, but, I mean, this guy, can catch arrows in midair. He's an awesome character, which is, again, why when people just think of him as, a token black Motu character, I'm like, do you have any idea how cool this character is? I mean, yeah, I guess there's only so far you can get clamping people, but I love how he does that in Revelations. He just picks up Tila and moves her or something. I forget who he picks up. No, it's Adam? I don't remember. Revelations is sort of a blur, but yeah, in the battlefield I know he does this, and I'm like, oh, that's funny. So yeah, Clampchamp. But to me, he also represents the future of the brand, because with Man-at-Arms going over to the Snake Men, taking his place in that core group, that very much was how I saw him fitting in, is he's now a member of the core Masters of the Universe. And it's really cool to have an extension to that very tight core team, because that doesn't change that much. Usually it's new factions being added, not new members of the heroic, the core heroic team. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about the character, even if he's, just wearing Fisto's armor.